Well, the stage is set in Chicago as we go to air this morning for Joe Biden to officially pass the torch to Kamala Harris as the party's presidential nominee at the Democratic National Convention as it gets underway. On the streets surrounding the stadium, pro-Palestine demonstrations continue, while inside the stadium, the US president is due to take to the stage today for day one of the event, which is being framed as a celebration of Joe Biden's legacy with the theme For the People.
Kamala Harris will officially accept the party's presidential nomination as some of the latest polls suggest she has overtaken former President Donald Trump in the race for the White House. Let's go to our North America correspondent Carrington Clark, who is at the DNC in Chicago. Carrington, tell us all about what's going on. What's the main event today?
Well, good morning. We are starting to see this arena fill with both delegates, invited guests and party officials. They're still doing some of the last-minute testing to make sure that it does go off without a hitch. Today is all about Joe Biden. He is the American president. This speech is being framed about defence of his record as the man in the White House and what he's done over the last 3.5 years. But it is an unusual situation. I mean, 4 weeks ago, Joe Biden was expected to come here to Chicago to receive once again the endorsement of his party to run again against former President Donald Trump at the upcoming presidential election. That all changed with that disastrous debate performance, and instead he endorsed his VP, Kamala Harris, who was then very quickly able to unite the party, in part by uniting the delegates that had been pledged to Joe Biden, almost all of them, to support her cause. So Joe Biden will take to the stage today surrounded by some of his strongest supporters. He'll be introduced by his daughter Ashley. The First Lady Jill Biden will also take to the stage. And before him, we'll also hear from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who of course was the nominee of the Democratic Party back in 2016, where she took on Donald Trump, lost to him. Joe Biden then beat him in 2020, and obviously they'll be hoping that Kamala Harris can repeat the feat of Joe Biden. But he will also be here to try to help define Kamala Harris in the eyes of the American public. She's had the VP job for 3.5 years, but for many, she's still a relatively unknown quantity. Recent polls would suggest, though, that this honeymoon period that she's been in since she became the presumptive nominee has continued. The polls first tightened, and now it appears that she is ahead, particularly in some of those key states that will determine this election. So today, yes, it's about Joe Biden. It's about his legacy. It's about him receiving the thanks of his enthusiastic supporters. But really, this is all about setting up Kamala Harris, the party showing that it is a united force, and trying to convince any Americans who might be thinking of voting for her that she is somebody who can occupy that highest office in the land.
Yeah, Carrington, we can see a lot more people inside that stadium now. But as we mentioned, it's a lot about what is going on outside that stadium. Tell us about the protests that have been happening in Chicago. What's going on there?
So there were expectations that perhaps tens of thousands of people would take to the streets outside the DNC. Streets, many of which have been heavily blocked off. There's fencing around, there are snipers. This is a very secure facility. But there were expected to be tens of thousands of progressive Democratic supporters, it should be pointed out, who wanted to march on the DNC to protest the administration, the Biden-Harris administration's enduring support for Israel in the war in Gaza. However, it does appear that the protest has been far smaller than expected. There is a second protest planned for Thursday, local time, when Kamala Harris will go to the centre stage here to receive the party's endorsement and will give the keynote address. So we wait to see how that goes. But you would have to say that the Democratic Party would be pleased, perhaps, that the protest wasn't as big today, because it means that it's one less distraction. And they do want to project this image of a party that is united, that is fully behind Kamala Harris as it tries to take the fight up to the Republicans. Now, there are still major hurdles for Kamala Harris. She has not participated in either a press conference nor a sit-down interview since she became the presumptive nominee. She hasn't faced forensic questioning since she took over the leadership of the party. And there are major points that are seen as weaknesses by Republicans, in particular of the Biden-Harris administration when it comes to the economy, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to immigration policy. And although she has tried to articulate a message on the economy, she hasn't addressed some of those tricky questions. So, less than 80 days to go now until this presidential election. The Democrats have the momentum, but there are plenty of things that potentially could trip up this campaign.
Carrington Clark, thank you. And as we've been speaking to you, we've been showing live pictures, plenty of police there lining the streets. We've got big barricades that are being put up in place to prevent the protesters from getting closer to that arena. Carrington, thank you.
And in breaking news, Russian-American journalist Masha Gessen has confirmed their visa application to Australia has been granted. They claimed it had initially been stalled over criminal charges laid by the Kremlin. The prominent critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Australian authorities of giving Russia an ally in constraining them. Masha Gessen has told RN Breakfast they expected trouble entering other countries, but not Australia. A spokesperson for the department has told the ABC that Home Affairs doesn't comment on individual cases due to privacy reasons. We'll be speaking to Masha Gessen very shortly and bring you any developments throughout the program. Well, the construction union at the centre of bikie infiltration allegations will be put into administration. The Senate passed the new laws last night after the government agreed to some final amendments. Our political reporter Isobel Roe joins us now from Parliament House. Good morning to you, Isobel. This was a back and forth kind of thing. The coalition weren't going to support it. Finally, they did. What does it mean for the union?
Well, Lisa, it means that in just a few days, potentially, most branches, including the national division of the CFMEU, could be under the control of an independent external administrator. Now, this could be finalised in the next few days, according to the Workplace Relations Minister, and it comes after the bill, as you say, did get stuck in the Senate. The government was able to get the coalition to agree to support it on the proviso that it made a few amendments, and those are things like making sure that the administrator reports to the Parliament every month, making sure the minimum term of administration is 3 years. There was also assurances given to the coalition that Labor would not be able to receive donations from the CFMEU, and the CFMEU administrator has actually written to the minister and said that they won't allow the union to make any of those political donations or partake in any sort of party political conduct while that administration period is underway. We also know that the Greens objected to this bill. They voted against it, and the party leader Adam Bandt has been on Radio National this morning saying that he thinks that the bill is an attack on the rule of law. He says it gives the government too much power and it would allow anyone to be appointed as administrator, particularly if there's a change of government. Now, the Workplace Relations Minister Murray Watt has responded to that just earlier. Here's what he had to say.
Powers aren't being exclusively given to the minister of the day, whether that be me or a future minister. They can be exercised at the request only of the administrator. So I think that is a pretty important safeguard.
The CFMEU National Secretary Zack Smith is also unhappy with this. He's called it a targeted attack on workers and says that these allegations of bikie infiltration have so far only just been tested in the media.
OK, Isobel, thank you.
Brittany Higgins will no longer give evidence in her own defence in the defamation trial brought by Liberal Senator Linda Reynolds. Ms Higgins' lawyer cited her medical state as one of the key reasons for the decision, which has now left the timeline for the almost 5-week trial under a cloud.
Foxtel CEO Patrick Delany has met with and unreservedly apologised to leaders of Australia's Jewish community after a photo of him performing a Nazi salute was leaked. Media outlet Crikey published a photo of Mr Delany performing the act while CEO of Fox Sports in the mid-2010s. Mr Delany says while it was inappropriate, it was done in a circumstance where he was likening it to the gesture some Western Sydney Wanderers fans were using 10 years ago.
Port Adelaide Football Club is condemning racist comments on social media targeted at Willie Rioli, which surfaced after Saturday's match against the Crows. Port Adelaide also confirmed its mascot was allegedly punched by a crowd member on the night. Adelaide Oval's Management Authority says it is aware of the incident.
One man has died and 6 people are missing after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. A high-profile British tech magnate is among those missing. The Italian Coast Guard released a vision saying the 56-metre-long British-registered vessel was struck by an unexpectedly violent storm. 22 people were on board.
US TV talk show host Phil Donahue has died at the age of 88. Dubbed the king of daytime talk, he hosted more than 6,000 editions of his talk show between 1967 and 1996. It was the first to include many elements familiar to viewers today, including participation from a studio audience. Yeah, lots of tributes coming in for Phil Donahue.